It's not because Christianity recommends, X, Y, and Z, but it's through Christianity that we become great.
They condemn racism, but they only condemn whites who happen to be racist.
And in a way, God is just whatever it is that keeps our civilization going.
White people are constantly being told that race is a social construct. It's not even biological.
And you think, where do you belong? You belong in a shopping mall. There's nothing to you other than that.
Hello everybody, I am your host Matthew Drake. Welcome to our weekly stream, World of Scarcity. This is episode 13, lucky 13. Well, today we're going to be talking about some Christian ideas. We're going to be talking about some nationalist ideas. And we're going to do all that in the context of one Jesse Lee Peterson. So, I hope everyone's doing okay out there. And let's begin with a prayer, shall we? So, bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before Thee today. In very troubled times, and for many reasons, many of us have lost our way. We also come to You on February, which we all know is Black History Month. And though we may have our issues with the darker race, help us to reach some common ground and realize that nationalists are both striving, whether white or black or Asian, we're all striving for similar goals. And help us to remember Thy teachings. Help us to not cuck. Help us to give thanks for all that we have and all that we have not yet lost, which through Thy power, if we harness it correctly, we can overcome and create a world that is even better than before this chaos erupted. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. All right, how are you all doing today? Yes. So, welcome to my Christian friends and Christian haters alike. You're all welcome here, This is a family. This is a family, and nobody is perfect, of course, but we're all striving to do better. And we're going to call you out if you're not meeting the levels that you should be. So, yeah. I have a surprise for you guys today. I made a little drawing. I think I'm going to do this more frequently. I don't know if it'll be every week, but I have a drawing. It's called The Browning of America. You might have seen it. Oh, and by the way, speaking of the cover image, some people might be wondering, how do I know if Matthew is having Jesse Lee Peterson on as a guest or not? Well, if you're a savvy watcher of World of Scarcity, you will know that whenever I put out a stream where I have a guest, it's got a black world background. And whenever I have just one of these chill streams or review streams, it's a blue image. So now you know. Now you know not to be confused. So don't have Jesse on. Maybe that'll happen in the future. But he was on this week on the alt-right over on Mark Collette channels, who Mark we have had on the channel before. Also, by the way, welcome to the new people in the stream. You know, I wanna keep things. This is partly why I drew this picture, is because there's always new people coming in. So we need to talk about some of our most important points and hammer those home. So this picture is called The Browning of America. And let's see if I can move over here so that I can still see you guys. There we go. Yeah. So here's my little picture. I'll be posting this to Twitter. I think I'm gonna actually, because I want to do more of this kind of art in this style, I might just create a new Twitter account. So you can go follow me over there. It's let's see if I can remember it. It's pen_Western pen. So we'll see if anyone's smart enough to get through the rabbit hole here without me posting a link to it. But yeah, that's eventually going to be the home for these kinds of drawings. And yeah, so here I had this idea for a long time. I just wanted to show an image of the United States on a frying pan, and obviously it's being browned. In fact, it's being charred. If you look at the edges of this porterhouse steak, which is in the shape of the United States. That's right, Chuck. I clickbait you guys. But so what have we got here? Obviously, we've got this charring, burning steak. And I like my steak charred, don't get me wrong. But does the steak like it when it's charred? No. So that's the idea here, is we're being served up on a platter. White people in this country, and not just white people, all Americans, they weren't asked. We weren't asked if we wanted to have this mass immigration policy where every year the numbers seem to get higher and higher of people who come here. And of course, most of them are not white. Most of these legal immigrants, and illegal. So yeah, some of this is illegal immigration that is browning our country, but some of it's legal immigration as well. And I think they're both cause for concern, not because we hate these other races, but because this is still our country, and it's worth fighting for. And frankly, if you don't want the culture and the politics to change, well, you should be opposed to this immigration policy. And as I say, the 1965 Immigration Act was when this all started. And you guys all probably know that before that we had 40 years of a different kind of immigration policy proposed by people like Madison Grant and so on. And it was based on a quota system. It's very reasonable. We could still go back to that. We could still go back to those days. So, yes, somebody's saying, whose hand is that? Well, it is no secret, frankly, that a lot of pro-Israel groups, what I would term Blue Jays, people working against our interests, were involved heavily in this 1965 Immigration Act. And you can go on their websites. Organizations like... Hias and others, even some of the synagogues and so on, were instrumental in pushing for this immigration policy. And Hart-Celler Act, well, Celler is named after Emanuel Celler, who was Jewish. They got a goy named Ted Kennedy, you may have heard of him, to actually pitch this act to the United States people. And he lied. He lied to people and told them, hey, this isn't going to change the demographics. Oh, no. Don't worry about that. This is just procedural. It's nothing to worry about. It's just a little... We're just updating things to be more modern. It's okay. Don't freak out about this. But of course, one thing leads to another, and here we are now, where in 2019, in about 30 years or so, maybe less, maybe 20 years, white people will be a minority in the country. It's rough. It's rough. And yeah, you look at this image here, and I actually modeled the browning or the charredness after a chart that I had found. If you look up, let's see here, look up infant under the age of 1, white minority. I think it'll come up. I'm sorry, I should have found this. Should have prepped for this. Where is this silly chart? I mean, the idea is that white births, yeah, it's going to take 20 years before we're a minority, but a lot of our population is older. And so, yeah, we're already a minority of the, here it is. We're already a minority of the births. Just look at this. This is by county. I just want the image. Come on, just give me the image. So here we go. This is percentage of infants under age 1 who are non-white. So this is why on my steak, the bottom of the steak is a lot more charred than the rest of it. What was I seeing? There's only like a few only a few counties where the white population has increased, and I think the Dakotas are pretty good about that. Montana over here, but the southern part of the country, we're losing it. And I tweeted out this photo here to Donald Trump, and I said with a red line right on the edge here, and I said you're building the wall in the wrong place, because yeah, some of these counties are just, whew. I mean, the dark blue here is 60% and above non-white. So wow, you know, I mean, we still have some holdouts like Maine, some of these midwestern places, but yeah, you go down there, you look at some of these school districts, like you get like a couple token whites in the classroom in these places down there in Texas, like El Paso, or down in New Mexico. So yeah, tipping point. America reaches its demographic tipping point. So you're supposed to not be alarmed by this. You're supposed to just say, "Oh, this is cause for celebration." If the percent of infants being born is now more than 50% white, oh, this is progress. This is great. But they would never say that about any non-white country that this was happening to. So yeah, we weren't asked about this. And I still hold that it's possible to go back, but it definitely gets harder all the time, right? So where are we gonna go? It's a good question. So that's kind of a rundown of this image, the browning of America, and yeah, let's move on to our main topic du jour, which is Jesse Lee Peterson. Now, I quite like Jesse. He's got a lot of smart things to say, and so in this episode of World of Scarcity, I'm going to go through and talk to you guys about 3 of the things I think he did really well in here, and things that were just huge wins for him. He's really, reaching across the aisle in a lot of ways. As you'll see, he agreed with the 14 words, and but he does have some foibles, some trip-ups, some things that I disagree with. But those are actually more in the, Christian camp. It's funny enough, like, on the nationalism thing, it seems like we're pretty much on the same page, but I disagree with some of his stuff about the Christian things. I think he's adopted some of this cockiness and this element that's creeped into Christianity that is undesirable, and I take issue with some of it. Okay, so the first place we're going to go to, I'm going to skip around a little bit, right? Wait, first of all, let's make sure we can hear this.
Normal for a man to chase a woman?
Yeah, you guys can hear that. Okay. All right. Let's see. We're going to skip to the 55-minute mark here. And he's talking about... a lot of this is dedicated to relationship advice, which is great. I really agree with him on the way that men have been emasculated and how big of a stumbling block that has been for us. My channel started out addressing feminism almost exclusively. I talked about other social justice-y things, pushback against the SJWs, all that stuff that was happening back in 2015. And it still holds true. I mean, feminism is a big problem, and a lot of people start there because they just realize that that's destroying families and destroying communities. And if you want to destroy a civilization, you start with the family. And how do you destroy the family? You destroy the man. So Jesse, it's about rebuilding it, about working backwards. He has this organization Bond, and he's got another podcast. Well, he does his live streams. He's also got something called The Fallen State, where he interviews big names. Somebody said they really recommended the Roseanne Barr interview. I know he's done stuff with like Ben Shapiro and other big names. So yeah, go check him out. Okay, let's see what we got here.
Hard to take over again in the right way. I believe that music will disappear. But if it doesn't, if men don't wake up, it's over. It's just over for mankind, because everybody will be corrupted. Because if you don't deal with evil, eventually it will corrupt you. That's why you have to deal with it within yourself and deal with it out in the world by pointing it out. Then it'll get better. But I have hope that it's going to get better.
Well, Jason, you had another question. You wanted some advice on how to find that good woman. Why don't you ask that question, and then we'll go.
I have advice about the woman. You want me to tell you?
Yes, please do.
A man should never, ever, 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 as long as you walk this earth, ever look for a woman. Because if you look for it, you're going to find the wrong thing. The only thing that men should be seeking is the kingdom of God within. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all things will be added to you. So if you seek him first, then if you want to have a family, you want to get married, have children, he will add the right woman unto you. And when that woman is added unto you, that marriage will last until death do you part. You should never, ever, ever seek a woman. That's not the right way to do it. That's why you find the wrong one, because you don't know what you want. The right one will be added unto you.
Yeah, so here, this is just great advice, great classic JLP advice, and you can see why he's so valued out there among men looking for a way forward. Because what are we told? We're told to appease women, right? Constantly. Oh, you know, don't upset a woman. It's about what she wants. And this is the thing with the pickup artists. They pick up on this eventually. Is that eventually they learn, oh, what they say they want isn't exactly the same thing as what they want, you know, biologically. Someone says, in other words, get your shit together before looking for a broad. Yeah, kind of. But he's taking it one step further, right? He's saying, like, the woman will come to you. And this does not mean, I think there's an important difference. It doesn't mean you can't ever approach a girl. You know, like you just have to stand there waiting for her to ask you to the dance. It's not exactly what he's saying. He's saying that you should design your philosophy towards relationships by becoming so, this is what the pickup artists say, become so appealing that they will seek you out. Now, for instance, someone was asking me to talk about my courtship, my wife and I. And I think I'm going to release an essay about some of that stuff, you know, without getting into anything too personal. But I think I will. I have sort of an essay written that I actually wrote after my honeymoon that I still haven't released. So that would be a good thing to post on my website there, illustratedphilosophy.com. But, you know, I can tell you that I was already doing this. I had a face out there, and I was, mostly my hand. I was doing artwork. So, yeah, she was familiar with me through that. And even though I approached her and asked her out on a date, if she hadn't have already been familiar with me, it would have been a different starting point, right? And so that's pretty much the thing is, you know, this is the thing with sales, right? Is that cold calls are just awful. You hardly ever get any sales from cold calls. You have to make hundreds and hundreds of calls, and the odds are even worse for men because it's so skewed towards women. If you go on these dating apps and so on. Now, I know people who have made the dating app thing work. Some people swear by it. So I'm not going to say you can't ever find a match on that. But there's going to be some fumbling around at the beginning, and you almost just have to get lucky with that. So, yeah, I don't know that I recommend the dating apps so much in terms of finding a woman. But I like his talking point there. Don't approach it in terms of finding her. Approach it in terms of, ending up with the person you're supposed to end up with. And that's how you know it's a relationship, is because you're interacting, right? She has to contribute something as well to this little game. And so, yeah, it's kind of a truism that the playing hard to get. If you, the moment you pretend not to be interested in the woman, then suddenly, wait a second, I suddenly think that you're more attractive than you are. So it's kind of unfortunate that a lot of people don't know this. Now Jesse does say no sex before marriage, and I think that is so key. Yeah, we didn't. We decided to wait, and it was very hard, abstaining, waiting until marriage to have sex. But you know what? That just prompts things along. That just encourages things along, because a lot of people, they start dating. They date some woman, and, you know, I don't know, maybe she's the right woman, maybe she's not, but you don't get that resolution because you're stuck in this, as Stefan Molyneux would say, you're dick-napped. You can't really think clearly when you are in the height of toxic love. Toxic love is just another way of saying the emotion, the hormones are coursing through your body. So you're thinking in terms of that and what's best. And a lot of times you don't ask the really important questions that should get addressed pretty early on, like maybe third date, like, okay, what's your family like, and do you want kids, and that type of thing. So yeah, I would say if you're out there, if you're a male out there, let's say, and you're looking to have a woman, find a woman, settle down, well, that's good. You at least know what you're looking for, and that's the first step, really, is being serious about what you're looking for. But don't put too much stock in that. I would say, yeah, you want to really just figure your life out and become a fully actualized, fully realized man. That doesn't mean you have to have boatloads of cash, but it does mean not being a beta male, right? Yeah, it means having control over your life more than anything. Do you have control over your friendships? You know, if somebody stabs you in the back or betrays you, are you just going to accept that because, oh, well, we've been friends since high school or something, so can't really do anything about that? And so that's a huge turnoff. And then, you know, do you have control over your purpose? A lot of people, they get funneled into something. Maybe their parents wanted them to go into a certain field and they're not passionate about it, but oh, you know, it pays the bills. And so is that person going to be an ideal match for a woman? Probably not. I mean, the likelihood of burnout is a lot higher whenever you aren't so passionate about it. Or, you know, you can find other ways to fulfill your purpose. It doesn't have to be through your job, your economic resources. So yeah, I would say once you do get into a relationship, hold off on the sex, because that'll prompt you to get things moving along, right? Keep in mind, the ultimate goal for this is family, is children. That's what marriage is for. That's why do you think the anti-whites want to push it so much? Pushed liberalized morals, push degeneracy, licentiousness, all of these things which are anti-Christian. Well, it's because that whenever those principles, or not even principles, whenever those ideas sink into the mindset of a culture, it has extreme consequences. And one of those consequences, as we see, is the low birth rate in the West. And that, again, it's a cycle, because then low birth rate means politicians have an excuse. Now, they shouldn't be able to get away with this, but they do have the excuse that, oh, we need workers. They somehow get away with that. if we had this population boom like we did in the 50s, which I'm not saying is the ideal thing, but if we did have that, it'd be pretty hard to argue that, oh, we need these immigrants to come in and work. So yeah, I mean, hopefully you want a family. I talked with Stephen Franson about why people should want kids, but that's really what the purpose of marriage is. Marriage is a contract, basically. It's kind of cold in some ways, right? It's based on love. There's love hopefully there, but no, it's contractual, and part of that contract is not just between the two families of the people getting married. It's between the whole community, and the whole society even has a stake in it. So, yeah, I think Jesse's right on when he talks about never go looking for a woman. Yeah, and share this. Share this with your friends. If you've got pals of yours who are out there on the market, I think maybe, and especially if they've been searching for a long time, you might want to say, hey, why don't you just be single and focus on becoming a better version of yourself. I know that sounds corny sometimes, but we can all, the self-improvement thing, you know, a lot of people try to make money on self-improvement, but ultimately there's a reason that they can make money. It's because people really want to improve themselves, and they know that it'll pay off. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't stick with it. So that's the first triumph there for Jesse. And now we're going to go back a little bit. And listen to him talk about hierarchy. And so this is a very Christian principle. He's talking about hierarchy of the family. It's just radical, really. Radical that someone could get away with saying this, right? And not be called a bigot. Well, he is lampooned by the left, even though he's black, which tells you it's not about race for the left, right? I mean, yes, it is about race, but it's about their agenda, and their agenda is racial, but they don't really believe what they're saying. Otherwise, they would listen to what Jesse is saying here.
What's your take on that?
That's right. It's not normal for a man to chase a woman. It's normal for a woman to chase a man because it's in her nature to return to the man. The only reason that a man would chase a woman is that he's looking for mama's love. And he think that through sex that he's going to get his salvation back, that he's going to return to manhood. But he only returned to death because women don't have love to give. Women are the receivers of love as man receives his love from God. And so a man shouldn't be chasing it. That's why when the man stopped chasing, all of a sudden she's attracted to him because she want to pull him back. But in her mind, she want to pull him back to control him, but she's really looking for the love of a father. And that's what she should be getting from her husband.
Well, I'm just going to introduce Jason because he's been.
All right, yeah, so what he's talking about here is this hierarchy where you've got God at the top, man in the middle, and woman below the man. And you're thinking, oh, the feminist would hear this and she'd think, I can't believe he just said that. The woman is below the man? How dare you, you patriarchal pig! But this is the thing. Like, why do you think people are so... why do you think you get this reaction? Hopefully you get this reaction when you see these pictures of young, beautiful women going into the military. What, like, if there's anything left in you that is wholesome, it just breaks you a little bit when you see this. And there was a pretty young gal on Twitter that I tweeted out something. It tweeted really well, but you know, I messaged her mom because her mom was the one who put the tweet out. She called her daughter her tiny soldier. Oh, I'm so proud of my tiny soldier is going off to the military to participate and defend our country. And you get all these people saying, oh, this is great. I mean, thank you for your service. And, you know, I have to wonder how many of those people are genuine. Do they really, like, are you just signaling? And I think the mom was just signaling because right after that tweet, she tweeted out that this was really the hardest thing for me to do. It took a lot for me to do this. And so it kind of showed to me, at least, that she's very conflicted, but she's gotten all this pressure from society, and who knows who else in her family was pressuring her. We have to stop that, right? Because we don't want our women to just go and die in battle. And yes, I know not all, like a lot of women maybe aren't on the front lines, combat. It shouldn't matter. Like, okay, if you're going to say that the woman is a nurse in the military, then don't call her your tiny soldier, right? Don't put her in a uniform the same as men. But no, we do this because we have this warped concept of equality, and there's not... If there was equality, if God intended there to be equality in nature, he would have made us equal, but he didn't. And that's why there's differences. And so that's why this is still a Christian concept to some degree, at least. This family hierarchy. And I think it's one of the things which anti-whites haven't been able to subvert in the church is this reliance on the family. Because it just goes against it. If you're telling people, hey, you shouldn't, you know, God made a mistake. Actually, he wanted us to be equal, right? But, you know, so we have to go and correct his mistake. I mean, how arrogant is that? How arrogant is that? So, you know, obviously this works for civilization. It works for people when it's allowed to work. But it's only through intervention and propaganda that this is even something that's plausible. You know, where you have transgenderism, you have gender fluidity, all this garbage that seemed insane 10 years ago. Now it's just commonplace. And so what an anti-Christian idea, but anti any religion, because as I talk about religion, it's God is sort of the stand-in for civilization, and so you can't really have a religion that's just so subversive to flip the male and female roles, the gender roles, on its head. You're just going to end up with chaos and not reproducing. So I have to imagine that that's the goal that these anti-whites are pushing. You know, the Blue Jays, it may backfire on the Blue Jays, because will their country be able to sustain this onslaught that seems to be coming for everyone? I don't know. So yeah, and then the other part of it, God is above man. And this is super important too. This is one thing that I wish I had gotten. Of course, I was an atheist for a decade, but I didn't really understand the purpose of it or what it meant to say that God is primary. And that really means that God comes above your family. You know, I was talking with a friend, and he was saying, well, you know, your family is the most important. You gotta put your family first. I corrected him. I said, no, I put God first. And, you know, it's hard to imagine my family interest coming into conflict with my interest with God, but ultimately I do that for the benefit of my family, right? I mean, how do I explain this? So if you're a man especially, I think this is just one of the things that helps us to be humble. And when you are involved with a woman, it's very easy to just go and say, oh, well, I should just do what she wants because she's got the eggs. You know, it's not going to cost me that much. If I bend a little and if I'm a little flexible, instead of allowing God to be the final arbiter. And that's the way that it should be. That's why we have that's why matrimony is traditionally a union that's under God. And so this is there as a safety mechanism for men. It's primarily for men. I think that women can get something out of their relationship with God, but it's primarily men benefit the most from having that kind of spirituality and having that primacy in their life. Because men, they need to be motivated to do what is right, to go on to the next level, to the next thing. And if you've achieved your goal of family, then what is really pushing you on? You don't have any more guidance. Suddenly, so I used to be in a lot of libertarian circles, and so the libertarians, well, it's not just them. You hear all the time that power corrupts, and this is how this hierarchy of putting God above man is how we avoid getting corrupted by that power over our family. Yes, we're the head of the household. Yes, we have that responsibility, but we are ultimately servants. We're ultimately just here to be a conduit between God and the world. And if you see yourself in that role, it's really not demeaning at all. You know, it's funny that the feminists never tell the Christians that that man shouldn't be subject to God. It's like they only see the second part. They only see, oh, man's above woman, so you just think that you have ultimate power, huh? It's like, no. I report to a higher authority. And if you have that, then nothing can touch you and your family. Someone says, libertarians are autistic. I don't disagree. Yeah, it's right. I mean, like, if libertarians had any kind of practical sense at all, they would realize that they should be against mass migration, because it's going to create a less libertarian society. No, they want to chop their foot off, and while clinging to some twisted idea of principles. It's ridiculous. Yeah, you can look back at some of my conversations with Chris Cantwell, also former libertarian, who, yeah, I mean, it's just like libertarians and their principles. They're willing to die on their principles, but you can't have principles if your enemy, someone who is vociferously opposed to your well-being, if that person doesn't have principles. So principles is a relationship, and in that way it ties into the relationship thing. Think of principles or morality as kind of a woman, right? And you're out there and you're courting her, and she says, oh, You can't bring in, I mean, you'd be a statist. You're a statist if you are not for open borders, because borders are just arbitrary lines on a map. Don't you know that? And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. What? So you're saying we should have one world government? Just get rid of all the borders and have one person come to power? Because it's not going to happen that nobody comes to power. That's a fantasy. I do believe still somewhat in this idea that, I don't know if I'd call it ANCAP, but somewhat in this idea that there could be rulers who agree to not have this monopoly privilege, and that they agree to certain restrictions on their power, whether it's through cryptocurrency or something. But that's a topic for another time anyway. So yeah, you have to have borders. The more borders, the better, frankly. All right. What time is it? There we go. Let's plow on, shall we? Skipping ahead here to just after the hour mark. Here we go.
I do want to add to you, Mark, that white people are the most hated group of people on this side of heaven, and especially white, straight, conservative Christian men. And in America, the reason that the white man is so hated is because white men are leaders. They build. They are the one that's holding society together. If they can and that's why this attack is happening to the great white hope, President Trump. If they can break down the white, straight, conservative man of power, they can turn America into a socialist society. They can turn America into an evil society. The only thing that's holding us together right now is with the help of God, is a straight, white, conservative man, Christian man of power. And you saw what happened in South Africa. I hope you saw it. Black people took over the government in South Africa, Mommy Africa, and now they're taking the land away from white people without compensation. They're killing them. They're robbing, raping, cutting their body parts up. They're killing them in their own homes. And you don't hear an outcry from the world about that, because white people are hated. The world don't care about white people. It's unfortunate, but the world don't care about white people anymore. And whites have been afraid to stand up for themselves and lead the way. And I noticed that in this country, in America, whenever the people of color take over, it becomes hellhole. They don't build, they destroy. And the same thing happened in South Africa. So white people got to get over the anger so that they can overcome the fear and start standing up. Even in England, in Europe, the Allah Akbar people are taking over, the Muslim people, and they're wiping out white people. Nobody cares. White people won't even defend themselves there. And those who try to defend them, the rest of the whites will turn on them. This world is in a bad shape. And if we lose white people, it's over for the world.
Right.
There you go, folks. If we lose white people, it's over for the world. This guy knows. And it's like, this is exactly what I would be saying, I think. Can't say for sure, but if I were a non-white, right? You try to put yourselves in their shoes sometimes. That's what I would be saying. Be saying, are you kidding me? Look at the absolute wealth that has been created. Just untold wealth. And okay, yeah. You listen to Sean Hannity and he's like, oh, the Vietnamese, they're so poor over there, and oh, I gave my valet $100 bill, and he was in tears because he'd never seen so much money. And it's like, okay, first of all, a lot of people here a lot of people in America would probably cry if you gave them $100. Like, that's, you know, unfortunately, that's the way things are heading here, is we're heading for more poverty as a result of the mass immigration, of course, among other things. So, okay, yeah, Sean, it's like, I get that there's massive poverty everywhere else in the world, but can you just maybe compare how those places are now to, you know, before the big emergence of white Western Renaissance and Western capitalism and so on? So, like, white people have just been such a boon to the world, and yet, as he says, we're the most hated. So you have to imagine that the people who oppose us are just really evil psychopaths. Because how could you want the world to just descend back into that kind of chaos, which is where we're heading? Whites are a global minority. We normally don't think of ourselves as a minority because we live in our country where we're still, for the moment, a majority. But no, we're not doing so well on the grand scheme of things. And so, sure, we're partly to blame. I mean, he says, if whites let go of their anger, I'm not sure if I agree with that. I mean, you don't have to be angry to hold to your principles. You can be assertive, but the Muslims are angry, and they don't have that same problem. They're an expansionist civilization. So, you know, you could argue that anger could be a good thing, especially if it's righteous. And we'll get to this. I'm already jumping into the next point. I apologize for that. But yes, we need white people, and it is this is the best way I know how to celebrate Black History Month, is by showing you people like this. And I'm not going to lie to you like Turning Point USA and say, this guy is representative of all black people. No, I've seen the voting records. I understand. He's unique for whatever reason. You know, he talks about how he grew up in the Jim Crow South. He saw a lot of this stuff. He had a kind of a black nanny who really loved her white family that was taking care of her and everything, and gave her a place to live and so on. So, you know, these talks about slavery and reparations, it doesn't work on Jesse Lee Peterson. It doesn't work. And now, what do you see in the Democratic candidates? They are talking about reparations. I think 3 candidates: Kamala Harris, Castro, this Hispanic guy, and Elizabeth Warren. They have all come out and said, yeah, we might support some kind of thing around giving reparations to blacks for slavery. So that opens up a whole can of worms, right? But Jesse will be the first one to say, no, that is not the way to go. You know, I'm not sure. I think somebody asked him what he thought about Martin Luther King Jr. and he had mixed results. So I don't know if he's completely red-pilled on the MLK question, but he certainly understands that black people are going to be better off if white people are better off. And he's not a separatist, mind you. He's not one of these Hotep guys who, like a black Hotep Jesus, black Jesus, something. Hotep Jesus, that's what he is. He's not like Hotep Jesus, who is even more woke, you could say, in that he wants a nation for blacks. No, I mean, Jesse does talk about uniting the races. And it's like, okay, well, what do you mean by uniting, right? Because we could be united, but separate. And I think he could be open to some of this, if not outright splits in the country, at least some kind of segregation, which would naturally happen if you allowed natural forces to work out, and you don't have this this media berating people, telling them that if you don't have you need these quotas. If you have an all-white group, well, that's completely racist. You need to have diversity, and diversity just means more. It just means fewer white people, right? Let's see if he. I know he talks about the 14 words.
What do you think about that, Mark?
That's very powerful.
Do you agree?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you're saying. What you're saying is incredible. The red pills you're dropping tonight. This has been an absolute incredible show. But we have so many questions.
Let me ask you one quick thing, and then we go to the question. Do you know who Joel is? My audio engineer.
No.
He remember you from the last show. He met us at Barn.
Well done to him. Thank you for popping on the show. And Jesse, you are truly doing God's work. And I think the important thing about your work is how you're helping young men like him to advance in their lives and to take the right path. That is truly brilliant. And we wish him all the best for his future personal development.
He really enjoyed that interview with you the last time you were on. So I wanted him to say hello to you.
No, well, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to have him on the show, and good luck to him for the future.
All right.
Objective Realist gave $10 and said, Marxism exacerbates any existing problems that could be solved by simply focusing on keeping the family intact. David S. gave $5 and asked, Jesse, what's your opinion on the MGTOW men?
It's beta male. I think it's beta. It doesn't make sense.
Excellent. And I did a debate with a guy called the Global Man.
By the way, that debate is on my channel, The Global Man. You can go watch it.
You can Google that and you can see my debate to find out my full opinion of the MGTOW movement. Raccoon gave £5 and he said, good show, Mark. Mafiels gave $14 and said, will Jesse say the 14 words? We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children.
Absolutely. You have to secure the future of white Americans and white people, period. Because I'm telling you, if we lose white people, it's over for the world. White people are the only one that build countries that where you can be free. You can make all the money you want or not make any. You have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. But the mistake I think that white people made in this country, at least, was to create the Constitution that says that anybody can come in and they can do what they want. Because these people are coming in and they're invited or allowed in by white people, and then they come in, they turn on white people. And they're coming from S-hole countries. I don't think I should say shithole, right? S-hole countries. They're coming from those countries to the greatest country in the world, in this country at least, and they want to turn it into an S-hole country. They'll turn on it's like inviting a family member into your home and they try to take over your home. That's what's happening in America. So I'm telling white people to get married and make a truckload of white babies. We need white babies because we can't afford to lose the country.
Preach it, brother. Preach it. Oh, yeah. 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 You know, it's one thing you got to say about blacks is they can really preach when you get them going on the right topics, right? So, but yeah, this is just wonderful. So you know, we hear a lot about the fake black history and okay, blah blah blah, Hidden Figures. Isn't it funny how that's all just kind of made up stuff and Wakanda, Black Panther. The most recent example being Spike Lee. I didn't watch the Oscars, right? But I hear that Spike Lee gave some speech which was typically, predictably anti-white and anti-male, probably anti-Christian as well. I mean, he just looks like a buffoon, right? He gets up there. I mean, I don't know how people can make fun of the minstrel stuff that happened before in the blackface, and then what do we think is going on at the Oscars? Like, this is all genuine? Like, this isn't just a performance that he's putting on, let alone the movies themselves. I mean, give me a break. The minstrel stuff that happens now is nowhere near as bad as it. I mean, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as it. It wasn't anywhere near as bad back then as it is today, is what I'm trying to say. So someone says Matthew's doodles are always awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you. John Sinclair sent a message. $5. The European influence is the greatest gift anyone has ever given Black America. Right. European influence. Well, I mean, that's the founding of America, European influence. But yeah, I agree. And you can lament the fact that, oh, they were brought here on slave ships and so on. Abraham Lincoln wanted, I think it was him. Yeah, bunch of presidents in the past wanted to solve this problem, which they were at least willing to recognize that it was a problem back then. And they advocated for repatriation back to Africa, set up a whole country called Liberia. But ultimately that kind of fell flat, unfortunately. But so, it's a tough question. What do we do? Right? I mean, these blacks have been here for so long, and I do think that there is some truth to assimilation in that over time you kind of amalgamate and develop into something that is different from the group that where you came, assuming you remain separated from that group. I would say that white Americans are separate ethnic creation now, really. Ethnic and cultural creation from European. But we still have a solidarity with each other, right? So I imagine black people feel the same way about Africans. And in fact, Jesse Lee Peterson, I know one of the things he talks about is that he's not an Afro American, he's an American. Which again, we would take issue with some of this, oh, we all have to be one, but hey, he's kind of got a point in that he's more than just an African. And I think that too many people put the emphasis only on, oh, I'm African, like I've got all this ancestral African pride, and that's fine to have that pride, but what is implied with that is implied that they're against white culture, right? Because if they were to just become their own thing, it would be harder for them to say, oh, I'm completely against white Americans. But if they're Afrocentric and they've got these deep roots, even though 25% of their genetics is probably white, and that's why their IQ is higher than Africa, well, then you can't push the anti-white stuff as much. So that's why that meme doesn't get out there. And also, Rush talked about this, right, in my video I illustrated on white privilege. If white privilege is real, why don't these, mulattoes and so on identify with their white half? No, the Colin Kaepernicks and etc. Colin Kaepernick is half white, but he identifies as a black person. for social cues. All right. Enough of the white pills. This has been too uplifting, I think. It's time to go into the mistakes, the disagreements. I'll just call them disagreements. Again, I like a lot of what he says, but some of this stuff around emotions and so on, I gotta point it out. You know, I love you, Jesse. I love you. But, you know, we got to be clear. We got to be clear on the path forward. And I don't want you to, while you're sending people down the right path in a lot of ways, I don't want you to mislead people by adopting some of this, some of the subversive elements that have found their way into Christianity. So let's look for our first one, and that would be at 40. So here we're going to be talking about Blue Jays. Just as a warning, if anyone is uncomfortable talking about Blue Jays, they should leave. You still with me? Okay. Because you know, it's not something that I typically talk about on this channel. Typically that's reserved for the other channel. So just, you know, just kind of play it cool, right? Just between you and me. All right, here we go.
Right. Which surprised me, but it shows how far and how fast things have gone.
Yeah.
And one last thing, Michael Jackson, you know, he's somebody who was popular when I was growing up, the Jackson 5. He had a song called "They Don't Really Care About Us," and in the lyrics, you know, he had "Jew me, screw me, kick me, kike me." They were in the lyrics, and you've had him and others who have come out and talked about, you know, specifically because the music industry has been dominated by largely by Jews since the vaudeville days, going way back before even records, you know, music publishing, even the sheet music. And Michael Jackson and others have really talked about the way they feel they're exploited. And some rappers have said that they've been pushed to be more anti-police or more pro-violence by their producers. What do you think of? Do you have any thoughts about the role of you know, the Jews in the record industry and what kind of influence they have on music for blacks?
When I was growing up, I listened to the soul music. You know, it was really nice. It was fun. The men and women who performed the music at that time, they were decent people. You didn't see them, even if they had problems, those problems were hidden away because of shame. They didn't like promote it. And during those days, most of the entertainers, they had fathers and mothers together in their homes. And so they showed a sense of respect. This woman, Nicki, what's her name? Nicki Minaj. If you notice, I don't know if you're paying attention or not, but if you notice, women imitate men. And if men are weak, women will become weak, and they start carrying it out. They try to take credit for it, but they really do what men do. And back in the good old days, black men were strong men. You know, they were alpha males and not beta. And so the women wouldn't be acting that way and cursing like that and carrying out those things because the men would not tolerate it. And so the wives would not tolerate it. That meant the kids were not going to tolerate it. But when they broke up the family, all of a sudden, these women come out of the woodwork. They start taking over, call themselves taking over, and they are imitating men. They become preachers like men. They become rappers like men, except that the men are so perverted, so weak, so beta. And so those women like Nicki and others are imitating men. They want to be like the rappers. They want to act like they're independent. And so that's why you're seeing that now. And even whether it's the Jews or black writers and producers, they're all in that, most of them are in that fallen state that write this kind of stuff. And so you can expect to see that happening. And the people who are to blame for it are the adults who are carrying them out. No one is to blame for the way Black people act today, but Black people. You can't blame it on the whites. You can't blame it on the Mexicans. You can't blame it on the Jews, because as an adult, we are responsible for our own life. It's my responsibility to see that I'm wrong and to repent, apologize, repent, and God will take hold of my life again. But if I stay in that fallen state and refuse to admit that I'm wrong, then the world will control you. That's what they're supposed to do. They suck life out of each other.
So when you talk about the fallen state, when you talk about, say, the man having become weak, so in rap, you had men who were singing about, conquering all these women.
All right, I'm going to stop it because it's getting kind of robot-y there. I don't know if it's me or if it's that video, but you get the idea. He's talking about, not blaming other people, taking personal responsibility, which this is in response to the Blue Jay question when he's asked about it, and I think that's irrelevant. Taking personal responsibility. I get saying that other people doing shitty things isn't, you can't control other people, so focus on yourself. I understand that idea, but it's when he says don't blame other people, because a lot of times blame is used in a negative sense. It's used to say, well, it's not necessarily legitimate, this criticism that you have. You're kind of just blaming, and that's what I hear a lot around the Blue Jay question, is that, like, hey, there's no validity behind these things, and so you don't have a girlfriend. Oh, you're living in your parents' basement. Whatever it may be, they're always going to find something that you're not living up to, right? And somehow, that has to be 100% your fault. But the problem is, the people that I listen to, they almost never talk about this in their own life, in the sense of their own life. They talk about it from a structural and societal position. What have Blue Jays done to change the society? And is it not true that if they were not here in the society, if they were not included in the society, they would not have been able to accomplish the same things and change our society in the way that they did? Is that not true? And so they don't have an answer to that, because that question has nothing to do. It takes you out of the picture, your own life, your own personal responsibility. It's just looking at the facts. Can we just look at the facts? And it's not about blame. It's just saying it is actually about responsibility. It's assigning responsibility to the people who have done this, and asking people, because the problem is we don't know a lot of the facts. Like I said, a lot of people don't know this stuff about the 1965 Immigration Act. They just think, oh, immigration policy has always been this way. So a lot of people are completely in the dark on this. So, I'm sorry, Jesse, but what we're trying to do is really educate people so that they can make more informed decisions around this question. And you coming in here and saying, well, you're just pointing the finger, playing the blame game for things that don't go right in your life or whatever. I think that's disingenuous to the arguments. And maybe there are some people who say that, but it's definitely not anyone I know. It's not the people that I know in the alt-right or the dissident right who have brought this issue up. Talk about the hypocrisy of Blue Jays. You know, they want walls for Israel. They don't want walls for the United States. They want mass immigration for the United States, but they want to send non-Jews away out of Israel so that they can be an ethno-state. They are an ethno-state and a supremacist group as well. A lot of them, the Zionists, would call themselves supremacist in some sense. So what is that about? Do you have any criticisms that apply to these guys? Or are they just complete victims?
About their promiscuity and about drugs and violence. And then, so women like Nicki Minaj or Beyonce start talking about their own conquests of men.
Yes.
And
yes.
That would have been slut. So Beyonce in a song that she sang at the Super Bowl halftime show about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
She sang the whole song, but it had a line in it. They had a line, when he F me right, I take his ass to Red Lobster. These things on your show because I know you have standards.
Because they know, first of all, the parents would not tolerate it. The adults, and they can get away with that kind of stuff. And Beyonce and all those people who are making that kind of music, radio, whatever, you get played because they're afraid to be called.
Is this a problem with mine, or is this just that part of the video here?
And she tried to pass laws to make that he's going to return to manhood, but he only.
Okay, it must be a problem with my internet or something. It's getting all garbly. I apologize. All right. Let's look at the chat. Let's see. JD just tuned in. We're talking about Jesse Lee Peterson. Talking about the good and the bad, and we've covered the good things, the highlights from his appearance on This Week on the Alt-Right, which I recommend people go watch. It's a really good episode. So this is where we cover the bad things. Okay, so there's that aspect. Don't blame other people. It's just kind of a cop-out. I'm calling him out on this. I think he's just uncomfortable talking about it. So he goes to something that he knows really well, which is talking about personal responsibility. But it's not actually addressing the question. And to be fair, maybe he hasn't really gotten a lot of the information because he doesn't hang out in the same circles we do. So why would he see that stuff? Yeah, a lot of people still buy into these narratives that are pushed throughout the society. So, don't be too quick to blame him for kind of copping out on this question. It's hard to say what his motivation is. All right, number 2. Amazing. That's right. I'm gonna jump ahead. Here we go.
I have said over and over again that Christianity is the #1 religion. It's the best religion on this side of heaven. And I am honored, grateful to be a Christian. And what makes Christianity the #1 religion is that God, in Christianity, we are required to admit that we are wrong. We must be born again Because if we don't admit we are wrong and being born again, we will never enter into the kingdom of heaven within or above. Because when you're wrong, you're in that fallen state, and Satan is your daddy. And he's not going to allow the children of Satan to enter into the kingdom of heaven within or above. So that's why I believe that Christianity, one of the reasons, Christianity is the best.
I'm muted. Thank you, guys. Sorry. I thought people were saying that they couldn't hear me because I was talking too softly, and then I started shouting into the microphone, and it didn't help. But anyway, I was saying that Blue Jays aren't necessarily even chosen people, because they're probably descended from Edomites, who are descended from the brother of Jacob and not Jacob himself. Just an interesting tidbit. So, oh yes, people are enjoying the silence. That's good. Okay. Now we are getting to the meat of point number 2. But for those who didn't hear, I was just pointing out that Jesse Lee Peterson refers to the children of the lie. So I call them Blue Jays. He calls them the children of the lie. Whatever, it's all good. We can all get along. We all have our names for these satanic influences.
Best religion on this side of heaven. It's the only one that requires you to repent. Do you know of any other religion, Mark, that requires you to repent and be born again?
No.
Yeah, it's the only religion that makes you require that you have to admit that you're wrong. You're wrong for having anger, because anger is the same as resentment, judgment, and hatred. You're judging, you're playing God, and no one who plays God will enter into the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, well, I've got a bit of a question.
Yeah, so I was a little bit disappointed with this, and that they didn't really offer too much pushback, which I think it was a matter of them being a little starstruck, which I would be too if I had him on. I don't know if I would have the guts to call him out on some of these things or ask him to clarify. I would hope that I'd offer a little bit of pushback, right? Especially on the stuff we're about to talk about, but they didn't do that. That's okay. It's still a good episode. And this anger. So look, there is such a thing as righteous anger, okay? And this what he says is like anger is the same thing as hatred and the same thing as resentment. I think those were exact words, basically, which couldn't be further from the truth, okay? What is the purpose of anger, right? Why did God give us anger? Did he just give us anger to trip us up? After all, we're created in God's image, and God in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, he gets angry from time to time, if you haven't noticed. So it's a little confusing to me to say, oh, this emotion is bad. You have to absolve yourself of this thing, which God does frequently. So it's very hypocritical. I don't like it at all. Anger is a healthy emotion, guys. It is there to protect us. We get angry because we want to change our surroundings, okay? And it's actually a bad sign if you're not able to get angry. That means you've probably been broken in some ways by somebody or by just life or society or something, and that's not healthy. You need to work on getting that back. And I think he's wrong about white people. Like, the problem with whites is that they're not angry enough. I think just the opposite is true. We have lost our sense of anger. We should be very, very angry about the stuff that's happening. Okay. Now what I disagree with is that we should be resentful, because resentment is a different emotion. Resentment is, it has to do with vengeance. It has to do with wanting, like, I've been wronged and therefore I have to get back at somebody who has done me wrong, right? And I think that there is some truth in the idea that ultimately God will dish out the final justice in this world. And that doesn't mean that we can't act, we can't punish people and so on. But that does absolve us of a lot of responsibility of, feeling like we have to right all the wrongs that are out there. Certainly within a society itself, it's not sustainable. You couldn't, one person is resentful towards another and then they get revenge, and then, so, an eye for an eye. Oh, but just because I'm going to take a little extra. And then the next person who is done that to, well, they have to take back what was taken from them, that they think they're in the right. You understand, right? And so, well, this is where we have law, systems of law, and so on to resolve this stuff. But yeah, emotions are a gift, and they're there to guide us. Now, I do think that anger can be used by Satan. It can be harnessed. So we have to be careful that we're not led astray by our emotions, right? Just because you have an emotion doesn't mean you have to act on it. This is part of the journey of self-knowledge. It's part of just, you deal with your anger by looking at the things that have been done to you and the things that you've done, and repenting for the things that you've done, and coming to terms with the things that have been done to you. And that might mean confronting someone, which that ties into the third point that we're going to get to, but I'll save that. So let me just pull up here. You might be able to hear my baby in the background. She's angry. See? Even babies get angry when they don't get what they want, because they're trying to, and then they cry, and that's good because they're trying to get what they want, and they should get what they want when they're babies. So here we go. This has to do with hatred, right? Which we're always accused of. We're always accused of hatred. And this is from the Identitarian Quotes Twitter page, which is good. You should follow that. It says, Jared Taylor apparently says, healthy people prefer the company of their own, and it has nothing to do with hatred. Men love their families more than they love their neighbors, but this does not mean they hate their neighbors. Whites who love their racial family need bear no ill will towards non-whites. That's right. So we can be angry, and that can prompt us to action, without it devolving into this trope that the leftists always accuse us of, like, oh, you just have anger in your heart and you're racist, and that's almost never the point. And as you probably heard from my last stream with the Great Order, where we talked about love, and love is crucial to our movement. And the best people in our movement, the ones who are really the most intentioned, they're operating out of love. I guarantee you that. So, right. So this hatred idea, should we hate people who are doing evil? That's a good question. Should we hate people who are doing evil? And sometimes I go back and forth on this. I think that ultimately we should hate evil. We should hate the devil. We should hate Satan. I don't think we should hate evil people. But here I'm using a term of hatred and love which is very separated from actions. Because in this case, what I'm describing isn't really dependent on me. And that's very freeing, right? I don't control these evil people. And so it's not up to me whether I, choose to hate them or whatever. I hate the evil actions that they're doing. And if by consequence that means I hate them, sure. But then you don't get the flip side of that, which is I love the potential for them to repent, come back to God, and be absolved of their sins and become righteous comrades. And we have to want that for people. Now, it's also true that becomes very, very hard the more evil you commit. And so it's even more reason not to spend time trying to go and change these evil people, because it's not going to work. Only Christ can really work that kind of magic, right? We can try to be a facilitator of that, but we cannot ultimately do that. So yeah, I know that Jesse Lee Peterson has talked before, not necessarily here, but I've heard him say that we have to love all people. And I would agree with that. We should love all people who have the capacity to, which I think all people do have the capacity to repent. All people do have, in varying forms, but at least people who are alive do. That may change once they die, right? But yeah, I think people do have that capacity to change. We shouldn't put our hopes on that. Let's see. Oh yes, love. So he also says, which this really gets me. He says that we should love all people equally, which means, and he says then you should love your neighbor's children just as much as you love your own children. And this is very radical. I do not think that abides by the teachings of Christ. I don't think it's a tricky question, and I can understand maybe his argument in terms of, okay, you love the type of love I was just talking about, of love for the potential of human beings. Well, does one person have more potential than the other? It's very hard to gauge, and as Friar Ripperger says, who you can go look at my illustrations on Father Ripperger, as he says, sometimes the holiest people are the people who have come the farthest, right? They started really low down in their life, and they've managed to come back from this redemption arc, and it's even more compelling. So he says those people are holier. So I think maybe that is the type of love he's talking about, which, if it is, okay, I can understand why you would say that. I don't think that's the only kind of love, and I think that this other kind of love, which is more biological, is just as important. We shouldn't separate ourselves from our biological impulses, because that is a gift of God, right? We are flawed, but ultimately that is kind of the flaws allowed us to become good, because if we don't have the capacity for evil, we certainly can't be good, and we can't love, right? So all these things, it's a very intricate relationship. I think Jared Taylor has the right side of this, where there's nothing wrong with loving your own kind more than other groups. That, again, love, anger, all these things, it doesn't necessarily imply that you have to act on it, right? Or that you have to do something drastic. Like, we all act on this, right? What kind of a father would say, well, I love all children equally, so I'm going to divide my income by 2 billion or whatever, however many children there are in the world, and give it to all of them equally. That would just be absurd. So, I think Jesse, the problem is he has this idea of love, which is kind of abstract, and it's just about your mind and kind of what you, and maybe your heart, but it's not about action. And that's where I fundamentally disagree, because I think that love has to be about action. And that is, it's not only how we show love through our action, it's how we develop it and create that love is through our action. Yeah, you don't want to be a sucker and be wiped out just to virtue signal your morality. That's right. I mean, if everybody was on this love train, it's like, okay, you would have a chance of that working out. I still doubt it, but no, as it is, it seems like white Christians seem to be the suckers for this stuff, and that's got to stop, because it's really it's damaging to us, and that damage that we sustain means we can't carry out love further. You have to take care of yourself in order to love other people. You have to love yourself too. So, all right. Well, that's what I have to say about that. So, Number 3 is about forgiveness. And thanks everybody for bearing with me here. This is kind of a later stream. Normally we start around 7. But I like this time, this Tuesday evening, so definitely look out for me in the future. It seems like everyone's doing a stream these days, right? But it's just the way to go, I think. It gets so much interaction. It keeps me accountable because I get excited about it. So, and yeah, the chat is great. I mean, we really do have the best viewers.
And she would never admit she ran your father off, or she caused him to become an alcoholic because he didn't know how to deal with her. And so forgive your mothers so you can overcome that nature and return to your father. Just deal with your father too, but don't hate him. That's for men and women. And secondly, and when you do that, God will cause you to enter into the kingdom of heaven within, and life will be amazing. It really would be amazing. You would see it's a battle between good and evil, right from wrong. Has nothing to do with color, has nothing to do with being male or female. It's good versus evil. So forgive, and don't ask for forgiveness. Never, ever, 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 ever ask for forgiveness, because human beings will not forgive you. They see that as a weakness. God has it set up where if you forgive others, he will forgive you. You don't have to ask for forgiveness. Stop hating. Number 2, we have a nonprofit organization called Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. For 29 years this month, February 2019, we have been rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man, pointing the way back to God. Only God can change you. So they can help us by going to rebuildingtheman.com.
Okay, so there we go. Yeah, this part about, well, you have to forgive your mother and return to your father and so on. And I think similar to what I was saying before, forgiveness is not a choice. Anger is not a choice either. And so I would want to talk to him about this question, because I think that forgiveness is ultimately up to God. It has to do a lot with the restitution. Has restitution been made? But yeah, well, these are heavy topics. I won't lie to you. These are very heavy topics, and this channel is not like a. We don't talk about the things as much that like Jesse Lee Peterson does and Stefan Molyneux does about your family troubles and so on. And part of the reason for that is because I think there are bigger problems, and I think we need to focus on, it'd be great if we had time to just focus on healing everybody's familial trauma or problems and patch things up. And I do encourage people to do that to the extent that they can. But I would not say that forgiveness is a catch-all for these things, right? We want to be in the position where it's kind of a passive-aggressive tactic to say, if you don't forgive these people who have done you horribly wrong, I mean, let's especially if we're talking about abusive situations, forgiveness is fine if it's like small things where, okay, somebody didn't return your bicycle on time, but eventually they gave it back. Okay, they gave it back a week late. It's like, all right, I don't really like that, but it's not going to get in my way too much. It's not something I'm thinking about a lot. It doesn't impact me that much. So I can forgive that person. But he's talking about familial stuff. And man, if you want to see really where people get screwed up, you just have to look at the family. Okay, it's the same thing as car accidents. A large percentage of car accidents happen close to the home. Why is that? It's because people are so used to the route that they're driving, they just forget to pay attention. And so you get a lot of accidents. And this stuff about domestic abuse, it's largely the same thing, right? We hurt the ones we love, right? You could question whether we actually love them, but the ones that we say we love and cherish, often we end up hurting them, and it's not good stuff. It's not good stuff. And if somebody has hurt you in the past and they don't acknowledge that, let's say you go and you talk to them about it, which is a very courageous thing to do, is to talk to somebody about something, especially if it's so long in the past. But you go and talk to them about it, and especially if they just pretend like, oh, this never happened, that's a real fuck you. Excuse my language. I don't usually swear, but I felt like it was appropriate there. Yeah, that's messed up. Or if they acknowledge it, but they say, like, oh, what do you want me to do? Okay, it's in the past. Let's just forget about it. Won't you forgive me? And Jesse Lee Peterson says here, don't ever ask for forgiveness, right? But what would he say in this situation? Would he say that you should forgive somebody who's asking for forgiveness? Because isn't that just rewarding people for asking for forgiveness? So there's some logical things in this which aren't really making sense. To me, this is a way to patch things over, right? Because the fact is, a lot of families have this rot that goes really deep down to the core. And that's why people don't talk about it, is because they're afraid if they start bringing this stuff up that the relationship is just built on sand and not on rock, and then it's going to crumble. But you know what? You have to, if you want to salvage it and have something that's really strong that you can rely on in your future, it's important that you make that attempt. And don't be afraid to say, well, like, it's my family, they're an exception, they have to be there. So, like I said before, I don't talk about this very much because obviously it's contentious, but I think we have some bigger concerns right now, and I wish we had time to just focus on fixing these families and so on, but you can still focus on your new family, right? You can focus on the future and building it up. But the problem is the past likes this. The past has a habit of dragging you backwards a lot of times. And so, yeah, it's tempting to just patch it over. And the stuff that Jesse's talking about, I think, can do that with forgiveness. You do get this emotion where you feel better. Oh, I've forgiven this person. But I don't think those feelings go away. They're still sitting down there if you haven't resolved this stuff. So this is the last thing I would disagree with him on. You don't necessarily have to just forgive everyone who's done wrong to you. I think that itself is a disservice to morality and to those people, and to the people who maybe are in your life who are good people. It's a disservice to all of them. JD says forgiveness is for the person. Oh, forgiveness for the person is resentful in most situations. Forgiveness seems to come naturally when they change behavior as opposed to asking outright. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I would recommend people go talk to people they have problems with, but ultimately it's not your responsibility to get forgiveness out of this person, right? If they value you as a person, they should want to make amends, right? That's what any healthy person would want to do. I can't forgive Blue Jays till they knock it off. Well, that's exactly the thing. It's like, how are you going to provide restitution? It takes a long, long time. And, you know, if we're talking about generational forgiveness and we're talking about group forgiveness, then it is possible, right? Because we've had centuries of problems together, living together. And so what are you just going to say, oh, today that's going to start differently, it's going to turn around, and for the next couple centuries we're going to have perfect relationships, and it's going to neutralize everything? It's going to be tough. I think there will be a tendency for people to be bitter about this, especially once they learn the truth. And there will be people like Jesse who are out there saying, well, it's true that they've done these things that are wrong, but we have to forgive them because we're Christians. And no, I don't buy into that, and that's not the teachings of Christ that I know. Okay. I'm not going to get into like scriptures and stuff, although that would be interesting too. We don't really have time for that, but yes, Jesus does talk about forgiveness, and he talks about especially God forgiving you. But he talks about forgiveness. But I don't think that's a commandment, right? If it was that important, it would be a commandment. Now, it is a commandment to love your neighbor, which I explained earlier, the part about love for potential to do good. But it's not a commandment to forgive. I think that is a misnomer. And the people who have been subverting the church would love for you to believe that that is a commandment of Christ. You just have to forgive everyone who does you wrong. And the reason they do that is because people who are reasonable and compassionate, which frankly it sounds like white people a lot of times, who care genuinely the most, from what I see, about morality, it's those people who get taken advantage of. White Baron says, in other words, God forgives, but that's not on us down here. Right. Yeah, forgiveness will happen. And judgment will happen on the final day with God. And we don't have control over that. So, yeah, stop trying to control things that you're not able to control. Oh, okay, here we go. JD clarified. Forgiveness is for the person who is resentful and angry. The person who screwed you over isn't going to ask for it. Right. Yeah, most of the time they have to work through that with their own conscience, and A lot of times they're not willing to. Yeah, there's this idea of I'm not sure what he meant by that quote, but this idea of forgiving through hate, which that's not the right thing to think about. Not the right way to think about it. It's more like tough love, right? If you truly value virtue and goodness, you don't reward people for their ill deeds. Instead, you give them tough love. And that could represent itself, that could appear in any number of ways. And that's what we need to do as a society too. We need to give non-whites some tough love. We need to say, hey, we know we've been a little bit of a pushover, but we're going to stop that. And we're going to stop enabling your hatred, your anti-whiteness. We're not gonna be complicit in that. So when we push back, whatever that looks like, and it will be humane. I believe that it's going to be humane. It's not going to be genocides or anything like they want you to believe. Let's say it's something like deportation or certain incentives to repatriate. That's an example of tough love. It's an example of setting boundaries. Another example would be repealing Hart-Celler, going back to a quota system, or having a moratorium on immigration. These are all examples. And it's going to take a while to heal. First people have to wake up and realize what's actually going on. When they do, they're going to be very angry, and rightfully so. It'll take some time to heal. And it will be a growth process, because we have to fundamentally forgive ourselves for what we've allowed to happen. I think if forgiveness is to be a principle, and I'll end on this, if forgiveness is to be a principle, something that we hold steadfast to all the time, we have to start with forgiving ourselves. And when we forgive ourselves, when we ask for forgiveness from God, all things can come from that. Doesn't mean that we go out there and just give these blank checks of forgiveness to everybody. Quite the contrary. Sometimes the self-love can manifest in very harsh terms. But it's what needs to be done. And ultimately, people who have wronged us, they will thank us in the end. That is what I believe. And that is what my Bible tells me. And the teachings of Christ tell all of us. So I would encourage people to heed those words. And as you go about your week, hope you think somewhat on this conversation of love and hatred and forgiveness, and how it comes into our life, because we certainly can't go forward if we're emotionless creatures, if we're numb to these things that are inside of us. So Thank you, everyone. Also, I forgot to thank the last super chat. Antarctic Ice Queen sends $10. Have a great week.